The house was always quiet at dusk, the kind of silence that felt heavy, like it was hiding something. It was an old place, wooden floors that creaked under every step, walls lined with faded photographs of a family that once laughed together. I lived there with her, my stepsister Alina. We weren't blood, but the years had woven us into something closer than strangers, something more dangerous than friends. She was older by 3 years, always the one who knew more, saw more. When our parents married a decade ago, I was just a kid, awkward, quiet, trailing behind her like a shadow. She'd tease me, call me her little shadow, her voice sharp but warm. Back then, it was innocent. Back then, it was safe. But time changes things. It changed us. I grew taller, my voice deepened, and somewhere along the way I stopped being that kid. She noticed too. I could tell by the way her eyes lingered a little longer when I walked into a room, the way her laugh softened when we were alone. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't allowed to. One summer, everything shifted. Our parents were away, some anniversary trip to a place we didn't care about. The house was ours, and the air felt different, thicker, charged, like a storm waiting to break. We'd sit on the porch at night, the crickets humming, a bottle of cheap wine between us. She'd talk about her dreams, her fears, her voice low and unguarded. I'd listen, my heart pounding louder than I wanted to admit. "Do you ever feel trapped?" she asked one night, her bare foot brushing mine by accident, or maybe not. The touch sent a jolt through me, sharp and wrong. I pulled away, muttered something about the heat, but she just smiled a knowing, dangerous smile. "Trapped how?" I finally said, my throat dry. "By rules," she whispered, leaning closer. "By what we're supposed to be." I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I knew exactly what she meant. There was a line between us, invisible but real, drawn by years of shared meals, shared fights, shared silences. A line we weren't supposed to cross. But God help me, I wanted to. It was the little things that made it worse. The way she'd brush past me in the kitchen, her hand grazing my arm for a second too long. The way she'd leave her door cracked open at night. The soft glow of her lamp spilling into the hall like an invitation. I'd stand there sometimes just outside listening to her breathe, telling myself I'd walk away. I always did. But it was getting harder. One night it rained hard, relentless, the kind of storm that rattled the windows. I found her in the living room, curled up on the couch, a blanket slipping off her shoulder. She looked up at me, her eyes dark and unreadable. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. Too loud, I lied. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about her. She patted the space next to her, and I sat down, too close, the blanket warm from her body. We didn't talk for a while, just listened to the rain. Then she turned to me, her face inches from mine, and said, "What are we doing, Sam?" I froze. My name on her lips felt different this time, intimate, heavy. "What do you mean?" I managed. "You know what I mean," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This, whatever it is, it's not nothing." My heart slammed against my chest. I could smell her shampoo, feel the heat of her breath. The line was right there, trembling, begging to be crossed. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that it was nothing, that we could go back to being what we were. But I couldn't lie, not to her, not to myself. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice breaking. She reached out, her fingers brushing my jaw, soft but deliberate. "Maybe we don't have to do anything," she said. "Maybe it's enough to just feel it." And that was the worst part. Because feeling it, knowing it was there, alive between us, wasn't enough. It was torture. Every look, every touch, every unspoken word pulled me deeper into something I couldn't escape. Something I didn't want to escape. The rain stopped eventually, and so did we. She pulled her hand back, stood up, and walked upstairs without another word. I stayed on the couch, staring at the empty space where she'd been, my mind racing with what could have happened, what almost did. The next morning, she acted like nothing had changed. She made coffee, smiled at me across the table, called me her little shadow again. But I saw it in her eyes, the same ache I felt, the same unspoken truth. We'd never crossed that line, not really. But we'd live on its edge forever, caught between what we were and what we could never be. And maybe that was the real story, not the crossing, but the wanting. The endless, unbearable wanting.